It's not just corporations that profit off of our feelings of unworthiness, it's our institutions and all of the professions also. They reproduce the power they hold in part because of the widespread experience of internalized shame and unworthiness. This is really one of the core dynamics at play. So, internalized shame and unworthiness can disproportionately affect gifted empaths and from all backgrounds and cultures. So in this video, I want to talk about how this is really at the root of gifted empath struggles with finding work that feels correct, that is aligned, and I'll offer a way that we can try to reframe this so that we can dig a bit deeper into struggles with money that some might experience, and then reimagine a more effective relationship to this. So first off, if you're a gifted empath, it means that your giftedness includes the dimension of empathy or empathic reception. You think deeply and you feel deeply. But empathy on the level of giftedness goes far beyond just a fleeting instance of having empathy for someone or a situation. And it's really more of a full-blown modality of experience in the same way that our hearing is or our vision is its own modality of perception. So if this describes you, and you can check out a couple of my other recent videos that I did very specifically on gifted empaths. If this describes you, but you don't feel that you have any issues in your relationship to money or work, congratulations. It doesn't have to describe everybody, but there are many for whom it does. And so for the gifted empaths who do go through this, especially when you're younger, or if you're in your 30s when you're really meeting with the disillusionment from the matrix, then let's dig into this. That's what this video is about. So first of all, we're already dealing with a fundamental conflict between authenticity, which tends to be a core value of gifted empaths, and on the other hand, the very idea of money itself, which is a reductive and standardized interpretation of value. So remember how I said gifted empaths both think deeply and feel deeply? This conversation is a case in point. Most people are not thinking like this. They're not putting it into words like this, and it's not even an issue, okay? This is how we're different. So let's look at the specifics of the related struggles here. Now, these aren't going to be unique to all gifted empaths, as I said, and anyone could experience any one of these, but they do have a unique relationship to the way that gifted empaths will approach moving through the world or approach how they would like to move through the world. Now, let's just go through a little bit of a list here. So we may encounter struggles with the repetitive and formulaic nature of many aspects of the job application process. There is also the repetitive nature of many job roles where, again, this is about not having autonomy, and it's where there's little learning is required, where little input is required. This is really about, your full consciousness is not welcome here, right? You need to very specifically direct and suppress your consciousness to do the job role. And again, this is what makes us gifted empaths, right? The average person is not thinking anywhere near like this. So those are two things. Then we've got the whole issue of the micromanaging that goes on in a lot of companies, a lot of organizations. Really ineffective. And then, if we want to expand beyond this, we have the problem of how do we convert our gifts and talents and knowledge into some form that we can contribute in a way that, has value in the matrix, that can support us. And it's a very unique and special issue of translation. And it's also calls into question the very idea of like having a market and what that even means. So a market is really like this reductive and standardized perception of value. It's a reduction in terms of what will be recognized as meaningful. So it's already a selection from like the huge spectrum of consciousness. And it's basically saying, like, this is what we're going to recognize and what we will see and nothing else, because we need to put this into, we need to operationalize it and we need to standardize it so that we can put a monetary value on it and then put it into this system of exchange that we've developed. See, again, an average person isn't going to try to like put it into these terms at all, but this explains part of the reason why authenticity driven people are going to have real issues with this, especially if you like to think about complexity. This is very different from overthinking, right? This is not a maladaptive type of like rumination or something. We are meant for doing higher levels of integration. Like, that's one of our core skills and talents. And this is another, again, it's a case in point, what I'm doing right here, right now. So continuing with our list, I would also add, so there's a lot of administrative challenges that we might encounter, such as filling out belabored like employment forms or application forms that are asking some really strange standardized questions, and we want to answer truthfully because we're truthful people, and then there's ways that like the form itself can't really address truth. So, and this, it could also include like entering hours worked, cashing checks, sending invoices, and and then there's a whole issue of like colleagues you might work with, some of whom or many of whom might be like extremely insensitive because literally they are less aware, they haven't done inner work. Um, there's a lot of low key judgment that might happen for anybody who's even just the slightest bit different. So, like, I can remember from one job, someone was just asking, like, how people say, like, well, how's it going, and I gave like this really innocuous, kind of very simple answer, but it was truthful because I wasn't having a good day. And it wasn't even like, by no means was it any kind of like oversharing or anything like really difficult, but I just got a look. I got a look. Like one of those, like the energy was like, okay then. And like, cause they were like really uncomfortable for some reason with even like thinking about their own feelings, I guess, in regard to that at the moment. Again, this was so simple, but even in my mind, I was just like, oh my goodness. So that was a little sidebar. But again, an average person just might completely balk at this list, right? Like, it is just absurd, it seems, that someone could even have an issue or any resistance around like cashing a check, like getting paid, right? But there are deeper reasons for the resistance that people might experience around this. And one common denominator here is just, again, this complete standardization, which is a mindlessness, it's a complete unconsciousness that is at the root of so much of this. Now, both of these aspects, standardization and the unconsciousness, these conflict with an awakened, sensitive, and authentic approach to finding work and helping others, making a contribution, making a difference in the way that you know you can. And so, as gifted empaths, we can be highly sensitive to the ways in which we are being and feeling reduced into a standardized exchange of standardized inputs and standardized outputs. As I explained a couple of videos ago, we know we're meant to exchange our time, which is the way we experience consciousness here on Earth. We know we're meant to exchange time for meaning, not money. And so a big issue is the way that authenticity also conflicts with many of the value hierarchies and value systems that financial networks are involved in. You can think of your own obvious examples here. Let's face it, can we honestly say that a majority of these types of networks are actually helping people and not just in terms of survivalist status quo? Because that's not legitimate help, because that's just the reproduction of current levels of suffering, basically. We can't. A majority does not actually do that. There are rare pockets that do for, in limited ways, but definitely it's not the majority because that's literally why we still have this matrix. That's why it's still reproducing itself. The other issue with authenticity is that being committed to one's authenticity does introduce some friction because not as many people will understand it, or they may not support it, or they may not know how to, or they may not know why, because it's so individualistic. Again, the opposite of standardization, but this is what consciousness is about. Consciousness wants to exchange perspectives, it wants to exchange meaning, it wants to engage in the mutual co-calibration of meaning. This is the complete opposite of standardization. So, for example, it's great if maybe you can make the majority of your career selling paintings that everyone wants to put above their sofa, right? It's like the exact same ratio, 4 by 3. But what if your contribution is more complex than that? And it may need to be. You may already have an intuitive sense of this. So there may not be any existing categories that really support that yet. And you're meant to bring that into existence. So again, here, let's think about this deeper definition of what a market really is. It's a standardized way of perceiving and recognizing value. So it's a complete reduction. Like if you think of consciousness as like this fullness, like this plenum, this full spectrum of awareness or possible experience, an economic market is like such a reduction and selection and categorization of that into like highly specific modes of exchange. Okay, and the second major challenge here is what I opened this video with, and that is that we are all dealing with programmed feelings of internalized unworthiness, which can create a feedback loop that generates feelings of toxic shame. And if we don't break out of this, the toxic shame kind of grows and feeds upon itself and perpetuates the cycle. So this is really the most fundamental and urgent issue to fix, I would say. Like if you're in a place where you're having some kind of generalized struggles around money or ways of making income or finding aligned work, just like the go-to answer is like find out where you can address and heal some more issues of unworthiness. So for more on working our way out of shame, you can watch my video that I did on self-abandonment a couple of months ago, and I'll have the link to that up here. So this basic cycle starts with the way, again, value is reduced to income or to an amount of money, so that any resistance or obstacles to this gets translated into an implicit subconscious statement that we make to ourselves about our subjective value, about our perceived personal value, or our internal sense of being valuable. And this itself will be compounded by external factors like not being able to afford the housing that you want or other lifestyle decisions. And that's a combined pathway to the growth of toxic shame cycles that will then seem to confirm the original feeling of there being some kind of like obstacle in your way to like making a living for the type of life that you want and the type of contribution you can make. Here, it's important to remember, again, I've mentioned this before, that the matrix doesn't and can't recognize consciousness. It has some room for rewarding very specific types of authenticity. For example, like if you look a certain way or within certain acceptable constraints. For example, if you're Taylor or Travis, your authenticity is like rewarded. You can fill stadiums. And, that's a great example of how like there's a very limited scope for recognizing certain types of gifts. Now, if highly conscious individuals are going to interact or function within these structures, the full authentic dimension of our consciousness needs to be suppressed, and it needs to learn to do that willingly. Now, a good portion of this is, for example, the adaptive forms of what we might consider like healthy forms of socialization, right? There's good reasons, like someone isn't just like, or hopefully like isn't just gonna, go to the bathroom in the middle of the street, for example. That's a form of socialization. And there's related forms of socialization that are obviously helpful, and we're not trying to like negate that or say that we should all be living like squirrels, for example. But shame and unworthiness is a common involuntary way that the suppression of consciousness occurs. You learned somehow along the way from childhood or from other socialization experiences that you didn't have intrinsic value. So, how can you contribute what you don't have, right? That can be the reasoning that the subconscious uses, even though our authentic self knows this isn't true. So, what we need to do is reverse this cycle. You need to deprogram or reprogram all of this internalized unworthiness and actively fight against issues like imposter syndrome, which I'll have to say is a really effective tool of the matrix, because look at who experiences imposter syndrome and who doesn't. It's the sensitive and awakened people who actually do have something new and valuable to contribute, who are the ones who tend to deal with imposter syndrome, and listen to the people who say it doesn't exist. If you're someone the matrix has validated your entire life, and if you're not growing into deeper levels of authenticity, well, of course you're not going to feel imposter syndrome. Let's just say that. Okay, so there are two paths to breaking the cycle of not feeling good enough and or not feeling worthy and validated. Now, keep in mind that once you do start really healing these validation wounds, you can really do anything. Like, this goes way beyond just like money issues in the matrix. So the first approach basically is to double down on what the matrix requires in terms of how you direct your consciousness. So there's no judgment here. You may just need to allow yourself to take that transitional job role, or maybe it's getting a small certification so that you have more options given your situation. These are authentic moves, okay? Because you're acknowledging the exact reality of the situation that you're in, and you can respond to that. This is highly authentic, even if it's not yet aligned. So on this approach, again, you're not unconsciously living in the matrix. You're not denying it through judgment. You're accepting that there could even still be some growth or some specific medicine for you in some part of the matrix. So this is really different from just having an unconscious survivalist relationship to earning a living, for example. Now, the second broad approach here to breaking the cycle of unworthiness is a lot more direct, and it will require like more courage, because you'll need to move through fears of like being seen and being judged. So this broadly is like taking the path of giving consciousness itself exactly what it wants, exactly what you came here for. The real currency is not money, it's meaning. Consciousness seeks meaning from others. It seeks to produce meaning, to express meaning, to exchange meaning, exchanging perspectives and vantage points, exchanging insights. This is what the real currency is. So even before you get into questions like, well, is this going to make me any money? Or how can I support myself doing what I love? Just find the place where you can create a full loop, like a giving and receiving, an output and an input type of loop of exchanging meaning with others. So that's a really abstract way to say this. But for example, maybe you feel drawn to create something like a weekly social circle in your community center where you can share like documents and artifacts and stories about your local history, because maybe this is one of your side interests and passions. And you want to also like maybe run a community website that can like document some of these local histories, and then go further and like place your town into a wider regional context, and then bring in a more expanded analysis on some of the other issues that this intersects with. Like, that's a beautiful project, and it has so much intrinsic value because of the level of meaningful exchange that would occur here. And then your site also might want to, you may attract local advertisers, you may bring in some donations for the project, and then you could go from there. But the point is that you'd be starting with something that is deeply meaningful to you, because if it's that meaningful to you, others will find the same level of meaning. They will also resonate in the same way, because you've found like a specific path that consciousness needs to explore. So for example, like, you can start by journaling with questions like, what answers are you seeking for yourself? Like, on the deepest level, like if you can really journal down and figure out like what has really confused you and what would you really like to know. Now, You can also look at what activity you really lose track of time in because your level of absorption is so high. Why? Because of how much meaning is in there. Remember, consciousness is after meaning, like the way water seeks lower ground. So if you are that absorbed, it's like water running down the hill. Like you've found like this reservoir basically of meaning. And others, again, are going to have that interest too. So if you can then just construct a way that you can like share or exchange or teach from this place, this is a major form of authentic validation. And you will be recognized for who you are on an authentic basis. And this is exactly something that the Matrix can rarely provide for reasons, again, that I've already talked about. But this will gradually heal layers of shame or feeling not good enough that were never yours and were never true. So finally, though, if it's hard to find motivation still based on either of these two approaches, like at least try one of them in the spirit of a kind of defiant activism. Because imagine internalized unworthiness is kind of like if someone just threw a bucket of like cold, muddy water or worse on you. Like, of course, you won't be able to separate the feeling of that from like the gross, the wet, the cold, like, and even feeling like you deserved that, even. But this is exactly what happens. It's a direct result of the way that unconsciousness still present within our institutions and professions still works. So that's why this is really a type of activism. Becoming conscious, accepting yourself. Don't waste so much of your energy trying to fit into a category that some type of category that would provide you with like a sense of this external validation, a sense of really feeling seen, because it won't on an authentic level. Like there will still be whole layers of who you are that by nature are not going to fit into that. Again, like I said though, like the Matrix has like very limited slots of authenticity it will like reward and recognize. Like again, if you're Taylor or Travis. But in general, no. So I'll just wrap this up here for now, but I hope this helps by way of some type of insight or mindset shift. Like I would love to know. So please let me know in the comments how this relates to your situation. And if we can talk further on any one of these aspects, then we'll do that. Maybe I'll hold a webinar if you want to hold a webinar on this type of topic, if enough people want to like go in on one of these aspects.